Hello guys, welcome to my review for Star Wars Episode 8, The Last Jedi. This movie released back in 2017. I did review it back then as well. Do not watch that review, it's terrible. As I said, I was very conflicted when I walked out the cinema for that film. But I still loved it. I still loved everything in the movie, but there was just something about it that just wasn't right. But after 7 or 8 repeat viewings, every single time I watched this movie, literally the second viewing got better, the third viewing got better, fourth viewing got better, and now I'm probably on my 7th-ish viewing. It is the best it's ever been. Every single time I watch this movie, it gets better. Every single time, the highs get higher, and the lows, the issues I have with it, get lower and lower and lower, and I just consistently less care about them. Because this movie is just such an impactful Star Wars film, whether you see that as a great thing or a bad thing, is up to you. But I see it as a great thing. I think Rian Johnson did a massive thing with this movie, making it really unique as a Star Wars film, but still feeling as familiar as it could do to still grab you in. And this is, again, another really immersive film, like The Force Awakens. This is a really immersive Star Wars film. Let's get the issues out of the way first, because there are some. There are more issues here than there are in The Force Awakens, even though this movie... That's why I always struggle with this one in The Force Awakens, because The Force Awakens, I think, is a more consistent film, pace-wise, but this film does have a lot of pacing issues, and Force Awakens is definitely a better paced film than this movie, and in some ways it's also a better directed film. But The Last Jedi does a lot more for the characters and the story, and has a lot more extra meaning and messages, has a lot more impactful moments. And when I think about it, actually after rewatching it, The Last Jedi actually has so many more moments, memorable moments, and more powerful moments than The Force Awakens does. So sometimes I do appreciate The Last Jedi more, even though I think Force Awakens is a more consistent film. Leading off that comparison though, let's get into some of my issues with The Last Jedi. There are some cringy moments. The bit where Leia's flying on the ship in space is just like, okay, I get it. It works. It makes sense that she could do that. It's just... It's not... I feel that should have been a powerful moment, and it sort of just takes you off guard, and I still haven't got used to that yet. The scene where Kylo Ren takes his shirt off, I still can't help giggle. It works, it shows a bit of his humanity in there, and I understand why they did that, but it's still quite a funny moment. Some other elements people may find cringy are the Porgs. I think the Porgs are absolutely awesome. I think they worked perfectly. They were just an extra little creature in there. They didn't take up all the movie. They were just put in there, just add a little bit of humour with Chewbacca, and they did a great job with the Porgs. Luke milking that big beast I thought was great. I mean, green milk now instead of blue milk. I really liked that moment. It showed the hermit of Luke. I'll get more into Luke later on, but let's get into my biggest issue with this film, and really is my only issue with this movie. But The Force Awakens I only have nitpicks with. This I actually have this one big flaw, and that's the Canterbury sequence. It just doesn't work. It doesn't feel Star Wars. I understand why it needs to be there. It has certain messages and meanings in there for Star Wars, and that comes into Benicio del Toro's character, who is sort of like a Lando character. He's sort of betrays them, and sometimes he's on their side, sometimes he isn't. But I love the message that they put into this character. He showed them that, you know, don't pick a side, which is originally, and I love when he tells Finn that, because Finn originally didn't want to pick a side, he just wanted to run away, and then he picked a side, and he's sort of rethinking that at that moment, and I like what Benicio del Toro does there. But I appreciate his character because he shows that the Rebels and the First Order both get their ships and weapons from the same people. And it's just like, it makes you rethink these little things. But that counterbite sequence just didn't work for the pacing. It really bogged down the pacing in the first and second act. It felt like a detour from the rest of the movie. It didn't feel like it was part of the film. It felt like its own extended short story, and it didn't work well for the pacing of the movie, and that's mainly where the pacing issues come in that moment. But beyond the Canterbite stuff not really working, it's not terrible. Like, I can still watch it and enjoy some of it. It just doesn't feel right. The creatures, the setting, the music, it just doesn't feel like a Star Wars film at that moment. And again, it does bog on the pacing. But getting that out of the way, if that Canterbite scene was just shortened down, this movie would easily be better than The Force Awakens, but because that is there, it does have the severe pacing issue. But as soon as this movie reaches its third act, it is amazing. Like, absolutely amazing. Like, everything else was amazing before. Let's talk about Luke and Rey in the island. Majority of the scenes on the island are perfect. I wish there was more scenes between Luke and Rey. There are a lot of deleted scenes, which I've seen. which do deepen Luke's sort of training with Rey. Even though he doesn't kind of train her, he makes her train herself in a way. Luke's training is a very unique way of training. I didn't feel like they fully presented that to its level though, because if they just cut down the Gantabat sequence to give us more as Rey and Luke on the island, that would have benefited the pacing of this movie and given Luke and Rey a better relationship towards the end. But Luke Skywalker in this film is truly the best he has ever been. Mark Hamill's performance is excellent. A lot of people say, "Oh, it's not my Luke, boo." It's like, what the hell, man? Luke, what are you expecting him to do? Whip out a lightsaber sword and, like, take down the entire First Order? They even jokes about it in this movie. Who expected that to happen? He throws the lightsaber off the cliff. You know, he walks off. He says, "Go away." I love R2-D2 showing him the message of Princess Leia, "Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi, you're my only hope." That was a really heartwarming moment, and that was a true moment where it got Luke to change. But Luke changed. He knew it would change him, and he knew he had to help at that point, but he still was like, that's a cheap move, you know? He's still got that curmudgeon behaviour that sort of Yoda had when he went in exile, because that would happen. If you went in exile for a while at a time, if something really bad happened to you, you would change your behaviour, and you would get quite silly, and curmudgeon-y, and angry, and silly, and that's what Luke does. He gets a little like that, and it's quite hard to adjust to at some points. He's not as wise as I thought he would be. He's sort of a diminished old dude who has blocked himself off from the Force, and that's why when they give him a break for 40 minutes, when everyone else is doing their other stuff, and you have that little scene with Yoda with him, and seeing Yoda back is honestly heartwarming. It is amazing. I love that moment with Yoda, because there's such great meanings there, because Luke has become a bit like Yoda. Yoda went in exile, he went all silly and weird, but he started his ways about him. And having that scene with Yoda there really shows the transition of the Jedi. It shows the Jedi is about failure. And I love the messages they put in there about the Jedi. It sort of flips Star Wars on its side. It makes you rethink this. It makes you rethink that the Force maybe isn't used this way. Maybe the Jedi just don't need to exist. There are still going to be Force-sensitive people out there like Rey and like the little boy at the end. And that meaning really does sit with you and resonate with you, and sometimes you won't get it on a first viewing. It requires multiple viewings to understand the meanings and messages that Rian Johnson is putting across. And saying that, I'm sitting there thinking and wanting to analyze a Star Wars film again is amazing. It's actually more analytically of a film than The Empire Strikes Back. There's so many little meanings to pick out with The Last Jedi. Saying that, we know this movie has a lot of meanings and a lot of stuff to have. It's still gorgeous to look at. The action sequences are amazing. This is a really, really well-directed film. The space battles are quite intense, actually. And leading into space battles, we get Poe's arc, which I think is one of the better arcs in the film, because he starts a mutiny because he doesn't feel the plan is going to work. That leads into Admiral Holdo's character. I wasn't a huge fan of her character. I like what she did at the end with the ship, and that sort of redeemed her character for me. After learning out what her plan was, it sort of redeemed it. But before, I didn't really like her character because I was always on Poe's side, because Poe is amazing and I love Poe. But you realise that Poe was wrong, and he was actually screwing up everything. And at the end, he's the one that realises that you know, instead of fighting the First Order, we can just get away, we can escape on the Millennium Falcon, and we can save more lives. And I really appreciated that. I appreciate Poe's arc in this film, where it's not just about fighting, it's not just about blowing everything up, it's about trying to save as many lives. And that also links to the line that Rose says to Finn, which is a bit cheesy, and Rose as a character, I like her character. She's just in the movie far too much. She should have been a very small character. In this movie, instead of making you satisfied with stuff, not J.J. Abrams, Rian Johnson puts in certain things to deepen the messages and deepen the mythology of Star Wars rather than adding to the characters, which it still does. The Force connection that Rey and Kylo have is easily my favourite part about this movie besides Luke Skywalker, because that moment is, the moments between them give you a little bit of insight, and then you realise that Snoke was messing with their heads and tormenting Kylo, and then that leads into one of my favourite action sequences in the entire saga, where you have that amazing scene with the Praetorian Guards. Such an amazing action sequence. The music in The Last Jedi as well uses a lot of the same themes from The Force Awakens, but gives us more of an urgentness with them. It gives us a lot more fast-paced score. And I actually do like the score in The Last Jedi a bit more than The Force Awakens. I really do like John Williams' music in this film again. It's amazing. We get some great old themes. We get Yoda's theme back, the Imperial theme tune back, a lot of really great themes. The Force theme back when Luke dies, and Luke's death leading into the Crate battle. Everything on Crate is excellent. There's a few moments of humor in there. It felt like the end of A New Hope again. It felt like the start of Empire Strikes Back. It felt like that. Put me back into the original trilogy, and I loved that action scene. It was so fantastic. And the skimmers, the speeder things, I thought were really excellent. The walkers, great to see them back. And then we get to my favourite scene in this entire film, which is where Luke faces Kylo Ren. It's such an amazing moment. And, be honest, the scene where Luke says goodbye to Leia at the end is, oh my god, I teared up. It is so emotional. And when people say this movie is bad, when people say this movie harnesses Star Wars, I try and focus my brain off it because I love this movie so much, but I just don't understand why. I just think about it a little harder and it makes sense. It really, really frustrates me when people hate on this movie so much, and because if there was a little bit of hate, I wouldn't mind, but it's so much and it's everywhere, and I know there are people that love this movie. There are a lot of people who love this movie. It's got very high critic ratings and stuff like that. But I do actually get annoyed when people hate on this film so much, because it is a technically really well-made film with deep messages and meanings that deepen Star Wars and gets me excited. I feel excited when I watch Last Jedi. And again, like The Force Awakens, it ends in a sort of cliffhanger, but sort of way where it could be concluded. And it feels like a way it could conclude the saga, which is a little bit of a problem, because I feel like The Rise of Skywalker won't feel necessary, but I don't know, I haven't seen that film yet, I'm seeing it tomorrow, but The Last Jedi definitely has that feel to it, where it does feel satisfying in terms of a finale, but you still really want more. And let's talk about Luke's face-off with Kylo Ren. He's changed his appearance, he's changed his attitude, he's become more of the Luke we sort of expected beforehand, showing that he's sort of changed. Rey's sort of changed his views on this, and his face-off with Kylo Ren is amazing. It's shown how Kylo Ren has changed, because there's moments between Kylo Ren and Rey that are really emotionally impactful, but after he kills Snoke, of course, which I thought was really satisfying. I love how Snoke was just a complete red herring. He didn't mean anything to the story. I love how Rey's parents were nobody. Again, adding to that message that the Force is always somewhere. They don't have to be Jedi, don't have to be trained. The Force is always somewhere, like the boy at the end picking up his broom. Such a great message in this film that changes Star Wars. And I love that, and a lot of people did not like that, and I thought that was really clever. And actually, in The Rise of Skywalker, I hope they actually don't reveal Rey's parents, because I actually think that message was so powerful towards the end of this film that I just really hope they don't change it. I really hope this movie stays, the twists and turns in this movie stay as they are. And Luke's death is just so emotional. It's really satisfying, and he fades away looking at those two suns, of course, harkening back to the iconic shot in A New Hope. And it's truly emotional and satisfying, and I love that final shot of them all on the Vulcan. We get that final big group shot, and then it cuts away to the boy, and it's like, what? I thought the movie'd finish, but no. And then you realise what the message is. The little ending bit where you actually realise what the film was trying to tell you, what the film was about. And it's such a subtle ending, it's such a subtle theme, but works so well. Princess Leia in the film is excellent. The action sequences, as I said, are really great. The lightsaber battles are amazing. The wide shots, the colours are gorgeous here. Really great stuff in The Last Jedi. I really, really adore this film. It has so many amazing, incredible Star Wars moments. And besides the counterbite stuff and the pacing, I really don't have anything else wrong with this film. I think this is a much more emotionally impactful Star Wars film than The Force Awakens. It does have that pacing issue, but sometimes when you put that aside, I just love this film so much, and I will continue to do so, and no one can change my mind. And I'm going to give Star Wars The Last Jedi an A. I'm also going to give this movie a 9.6 out of 10. I do really, really love this film. But guys, comment down below your opinions on The Last Jedi. Interested to see what you think. And of course, thanks for watching, and may the Force be with you. Always.